Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Today, welcome a very special guest who's back on the show, Dr. Gabija Toleikyte. She's a fantastic neuroscientist, and today she's going to be speaking about leadership. And we're going to focus on decision-making, being influential, the effects of stress and the environment, and the importance of neuroscience for coaches. There's a lot that's been said. Neuroscience at the moment is the buzzword. We're going to get someone who's an expert in the field who's going to give us the rundown on how we can adapt some of this scientific research, the why, so to speak, in terms of how we can utilize some of these methodologies in coaching. Gabby, welcome to the show. Good to have you on board.
Yeah, good to be here, Jimmy, as usual.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So, Gabby, give us a bit of a rundown. Why is neuroscience important, do you think, for coaches to have at least a basic knowledge?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times coaches, therapists, consultants, they're dealing with change, helping people to make better decisions, helping people to manage others better, helping people who are constantly around other people. And as not a secret, right? We all have influence on each other. The way we are constantly, we want it or not, influence other people, and we get influenced by other people. And if we want that influence to be positive, if we want to actually do the change in certain direction, in my opinion, we need to understand first how our minds work and what is needed for us in order to manage people best. We need to understand how other people's minds work and why in certain situations, such as when we are stressed out, we freeze and we can't think and we can't be creative. What's needed for us to make the best decisions, and how we can kind of create that both working one-to-one as consultants, therapists, coaches, and in organizations as team leaders or business owners or HR staff, or somebody who is in a company, in organization, and keeps like kind of feeling like that they're not understood or they can't bring the best out of themselves. So I think neuroscience provides really, really valuable tool for us to understand ourselves better, understand other people better, and to understand what are the steps, practical steps, in creating a change in our own life and in our or in organizations, and helping others change.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we talk about leadership, and leadership is huge, really. And for me, leadership, Gabby, is about leading by example, by taking the initiative, and rather than manage people and work like you would manage a thing, or you'd manage a computer, you would manage a product. So for me, leadership is about the leader or people going to that place where they want people to go. So if they want people to be confident, motivated, then they go to that place, they take the initiative to step up and move forward. Now, what's your take on leadership? What are some of the key aspects, and where can leadership in the corporation learn from neuroscience? What can we bring from neuroscience to leadership that people can sort of take on board?
Yeah, maybe firstly I'll ask us to kind of zoom out a little bit, because let's look at leadership in a bit wider sense. I've been talking about leadership in very, very different environments. I talk about leadership to teenagers at schools, to teachers, school principals, to like people come to my seminars for general public on leadership as well. And in organizations, I've been speaking to the Welsh government, to multiple banks in Lithuania and in UK, to corporate companies, to consultants, to coaches. And when we actually just look at if we look at what people inspired us over the years, and when I ask that question, I always ask when I talk about leadership, now think of the person who brought the best in you, a person who truly, truly inspired you. And we all, if we kind of really sit with it for long enough, we all can find somebody with whom we were the best ourselves that we could be.
Great point.
In that state, we were creative, we were resourceful, we wanted to solve problems, we were really like, we were natural leaders ourselves, right? Can you think of any example like that, Jimmy?
Oh, no, very much so. I've been very fortunate in my experience as an athlete to worked with some great coaches. As a coach, as a therapist myself, I've been inspired by many great people over the years, and I've been very fortunate, like really have a big impact. And you make a really good point. Then I think the great point you make there for me is an analogy I use, Gabby, is say if you're a parent, for example, and you've got a cigarette in your mouth, you're smoking away, and say to your kids, "Don't smoke."
Yeah, or
yeah.
And then you're like eating food yourself. Yeah,
precisely, because the research suggests that parents who are obese are more than likely the kids have got a bigger chance. Now, I'm not implying. I know that people, people put on weight for various reasons, and that's not having a go at people. But the research suggests that the parents who've got obesity are more likely to the children have that too. So for me, and a teacher, for example, coming to the classroom, if the teacher comes into the classroom and they're demotivated, the students are hardly going to get motivated. So I think you make a great point. And that's the point I was trying to make, where if you're a leader of an organization, for me, if you want the people to be motivated, to be confident, to be, and that's the key for me. And some of the greatest people I work with, some great coaches, some well-known coaches, they had the skill, Gabija, to make great decisions. Exactly. They had the skill to step up when it mattered. They had the skill to when adversity strikes, they're the ones who stand up and they don't run away. They look at things head on, They're the ones who...
We're talking, Jimmy, about two components there. So when we think about the people who truly inspired us and whom we respected and whom we were really brought up by, we were kind of the best ourselves we could be, there was two components. One component that we respected the way they were. We respected the way they were doing things. They had a certain level of integrity, and the way they were doing things was really exemplary. But the second component, which is social skills. And that's something we can always learn. And with social skills, whenever I ask around the huge audiences, is always when I ask, what qualities did this person possess? And, I always hear they were interested in me. I mattered to them. I wasn't just if you think of your coaches, you weren't for them just just an object who could run certain distance. You were a person with your needs, with your fears, with your desires, right? When they usually accepted us for who we were, and they saw the best in us. They could see, us even not only who we were, they saw potential in us. And when the studies done in companies, they define that kind of leadership as resonant leadership. So resonant leaders, they actually really take time to get to know the team. They take time to really, try to understand how the team functions. They have really good knowledge about human behavior. And they have time and space to really connect with people. So when they're in conversation with a person, they're actually fully present. They're not thinking, okay, I'm talking to you, but I'm thinking what to send, in a message to a person. Or maybe sometimes, as we all encounter, some people are on the phone even while talking. So that's not thing, right? So this is one type of leaders called resonant leaders. And these leaders put us in a very connected state. Because when we are with a resonant leader, now it shows, first of all, in their brain, they activate the area called default mode and network, which enable them to be fully connected and to be at the same level with the person. If they see person suffering, they could easily go back to the past in the memory, and they find moments when they were suffering, and they kind of can make the best decision what's needed for that person best at that time. Because for kind of our remembering our own states, we need the full mode network. Now, second type of leaders, this is a bit simplified model, one, and let's look at just two types for now, is dissonant leaders. And again, if we ever think through in our past, through the people, they don't need to be even formally the leaders in the companies. They could be like teachers, parents, coaches, who actually looked at us as an object to achieve a goal. And with them, we felt replaceable. In other words, we felt like if we're either just the brain on the stick for them, and our performance and our achievement was what mattered to them. They didn't look at us as a kind of valuable individual. Our value depended on how well we performed. And that's so-called dissonant leadership. So dissonant leaders are very much achievement focused, and they induce a lot of stress in the team members and a lot of stress in the interactions, or in the parenting, or in the whatever kind of, because wherever there is a relationship, wherever there is interaction, there is leadership. It doesn't have to be formal leadership. And when we are kind of talking to people but not quite listening, we're on the phone or busy in our own mind, we're being dissonant as well. In dissonant relationships, unfortunately, we feel unappreciated, we feel unfulfilled. It activates the stress in the body and the brain, and in that state, every single one of us becomes more dissonant and more selfish and less capable of actually performing the best results. So those two,
how can we create an environment for people to flourish, Gabija? How can we create, what are some of the key things, the key fundamentals to create an environment where people don't feel stressed, they don't feel undervalued, they don't feel they're just a part of the person's goal? And leaders born, are they learned? Is it a bit of both? And what makes some people great and some people mediocre?
I think it's always, whenever we talk about anything, it's always both nature and nurture. There isn't no more debate, about it. But I think with leadership, there is different kinds of skills. So social skills, much better in terms of social skills to start with. Other people need to put a lot more effort to learn them. So when we are in, so I coach, when I started my coaching career, I was performance at work coach at University College London. And a lot of times my clients were in the positions. They were research team leaders, they were department heads, and so on. And some of them would come to me to say, I'm doing, I became a leader of this group because I'm a good scientist. People, and to be honest, I prefer to just be in the dark room of the lab doing experiments as opposed to managing people, right? So they say, but I feel really bad. I can't sleep at night. I have so many people I have impact on, and I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job. So first of all, first step, if you want to become better influence in your work, in your like day-to-day as a coach as well, or therapist, is getting to know your team, getting to know your people. So show natural curiosity, almost like if somebody is not like a people's person who naturally cares about that. Because for me that comes very easily because I just love people. I love to get to know people. There is for me like the most exciting thing on earth is people. So some people don't have that, natural drive. So actually taking that as a game, like really understanding, okay, like what else can I find out about Jimmy? What else can I find out about Gabija? What things do they care about? What are their biggest dreams? What are their biggest fears? What are their biggest successes? What things do they enjoy doing most at work? What things do they absolutely kind of dislike doing? It's kind of really like building as complete view of the person as possible.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff. And if we've got any people watching, we've probably got managers watching, coaches watching, and what I'd like to, if you could share, Gabby, so they understand a little bit more about how, if they don't already understand, what happens to the brain and stress. Because people, I don't think people realize that, in my experience, that if you place people under a significant amount of stress, they just science will back it up. They don't perform as well as they can do. I'm not saying create an environment sort of, Pollyanna, the world's wonderful, it's great. But create an environment where people can flourish. And can you sort of share with people your take on if the manager puts staff under a lot of stress, if the coach puts their team under a lot of stress, if the teacher stresses their students out and says, you know what, you've got to focus on the exams, you've got to get the grades. And these things are important, don't get me wrong, they're measuring tools. But I'm a big believer in focus on the process. Write your goal, then focus on the process, not the outcomes. The outcomes will cause more pressure on you. And if you're under so much pressure, the brain, we know scientifically, does not function as well as it could do. But if you could talk about for example, the shutdown of the amygdala starts to compromise the neocortex. Things like that, them lines really, so people understand they're aware of what happens to the brain, a lot of stress.
I think that's the second component. So first component is really building social skills. If we want to become better influence others. Second, reducing stress. And why is that important? So let me just briefly, like I know some of you who watched those interviews before heard of the True Brain model developed by Paul MacLean in 1990s. And so in that model, brain has many different parts responsible for different functions. That's called brain specialization. And if I was to image your brain, when you do different daily tasks, one area would lit up, for example, area at the back would lit up when you view, like processing visual information. Area on the side would lit up when you're processing sounds, and when you're listening, us talking right now, so on and so forth. But those multiple brain areas we can group into 3 compartments based on when they developed in evolution and how they function, how much energy they consume. So the most primitive areas which keep us alive are called lizard brain complex. They're just at the kind of lower centers of the brain. Actually, let me grab the brain. I always have a book stand of the brain. I don't know if you can see this. And so if these are the kind of the ones at the bottom of the brain, this is like your brain from the side, and this is like if I cut it in half, we're looking in the middle of your brain.
Yeah.
Okay. So this most primitive area is just there, the lizard brain. Now, those areas control your breathing, heartbeat, digestion. So they are always active. They never ever stop. And if they were to stop, if there was a tumor or any brain damage, unfortunately, the consequences usually are very significant. These areas a bit higher on top of the lizard brain, called mammal brain or limbic system, and these areas control our other functions which keep us safe. So, such as forming habits, certain centers of memory or automatic memory. You know, being able to walk, to drive, to ride a bicycle, to write. Right now, if you're taking notes, so the kind of automatization of daily processes, so you don't need to kind of consume too much energy for it. And also the centers for emotions are in this region as well. And if something in the environment signals there is potential danger, the mammal brain creates emotions in order to warn you about it, so you quickly react to it. Now, all that wrinkly a bit on the outside, called neocortex, in the True Brain model, it's called the human brain. And I know it's a bit misleading, human brain within the human brain. And also the second confusion area is that mammals have thin layer of neocortex, but humans have a way more developed neocortex. Now, in neocortex is the fanciest addition to your brain, which the number of functions, you know, I could talk about it endlessly. But the most importantly difference from the mammal, lizard brain, and neocortex is that neocortex does all those higher cognitive functions, such as understanding other people, empathy, creativity, good decision making, taking into account multiple components. Being yourself, being fully who you are. If you were to damage front of neocortex, your personality would change. You would not be able to suppress your emotions and suppress your urges. You would become very animalistic or very childlike. You know, if we look at the little toddlers, right? So the brain uses different amounts of energy for different area because there's very different processes happening. So brain always, with no exception, finds energy for lizard brain because that's what's needed to keep you alive. If there is any left, it gives to the limbic system, so to keep you safe and to keep you kind of doing your daily automatic, you know, things, so you kind of survive as well. So you can, you know, you can talk, you can walk, you can react emotionally to things, you can remember things, you can interact with others without, you know, like in a kind of habitual way. Now, Only when we are well rested, only when we are well nourished, and only when we aren't exhausted or stressed, brain has enough energy for very front of neocortex, called prefrontal cortex. Now, in that area and other part of the higher centers up there is crucial centers for empathy, for understanding others, for kind of being able to really think abstract thought. And when we are stressed, energy management shifts so that these centers don't get enough energy.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, we become very kind of mammal brain driven. So we do things on default, it's like, so if you've been trying to kind of control your emotions and not shout at your kids or not shout at your partner, or be like at the best that you can with your colleagues, with your team, when you're in mammal brain, mainly mammal brain activation, you do things what's your natural, the easiest option is. If you're angry, you shout. If you're jealous, you react. If you're happy, you laugh. It's kind of very, very reactive state. And in that state, we can't really make the best decisions, because the crucial area for decision making, which we might elaborate on a little bit further, is prefrontal cortex.
Yes, yes.
Another thing which happens also when we are in certain kinds of stress, when we're really in a very, very compromised emotional state, if we're really, really angry or really, really jealous or really, really afraid or anxious, part of mammal brain called amygdala, which is just down there, it actually suppresses prefrontal cortex even further, because prefrontal cortex and mammal brain constantly talk to one another, and prefrontal cortex can suppress your emotions. So, for example, if you're in the situation when you want to cry, but you think it wouldn't be a right time for me to cry right now, so you're using your prefrontal cortex, you can suppress your emotions temporarily. But also, if you're in a really, really, really bad state emotionally, that suppresses your prefrontal cortex too. So every single one of us become less intelligent in that state, less rational, and much, much, much more self-absorbed and kind of just in their own world. So converting that back to the leadership styles, stress is one of the main reasons why people actually, even knowing when it's the right time to be resonant, become dissonant. Every single person under big stress becomes dissonant, because that's kind of much, much easier to achieve and much less energy consuming. So if actually for good leadership or inspiring leadership and resonant leadership, first thing actually to do is create work, in the workplaces, create possibilities for people to take regular breaks, because working too hard for too long hours, that's a natural stressor. Controlling working hours, so people actually can get enough sleep each night. Lack of sleep is one of the biggest stressors. Having actually healthy food options, and even banning people from having lunch in front of the computers, not allowing that as an option at all. Maybe creating, ideally creating maybe a kind of a ritual where everybody goes for lunch together. They leave the building, they go out somewhere, they get some fresh air and have lunch together. So
families eat together too.
Sorry?
Families eat together as well would be a good.
And very interestingly, there's actually very, very lots of findings now saying that when we are in kind of that more like family-like interactions, when we truly feel that people naturally care about us and we naturally care about people, in the brain we secrete the chemical called oxytocin. And oxytocin is the best substance known to actually counterbalance the negative effects of stress on the brain. Because chronic stress actually does lots of damage to the brain. And if we actually are in the loving relationship, caring workplace, and have a good kind of social circle around us, the oxytocin balances off the effects of stress, so we are more resilient to the environmental the triggers in that state.
That's really interesting points there. And just to elaborate on what you've said there, and I'm sort of mindful of time, I want to sort of ask you some more questions. I find this really fascinating. Sort of viewers find it fascinating too. One thing I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Walter Mischel experiment. When I was writing a dissertation a while ago, I looked at one of the research papers I was looking at was the Walter Mischel, I think, experiments at Stanford, where he got like marshmallows. And I think the marshmallows, they might not be marshmallows, they're chocolate. No, okay. Yeah, and he had like a group of 5 or 6 year olds, and the teachers would go into the classroom and put the marshmallow on the table, and they'd offer them one now, or they could have 2 in, say, when they came back, and they'd be back in 5 minutes, they'd be back whenever they come back. And they found that the 5 or 6 year olds, some took the marshmallow, even though they could have 2 afterwards straight away. Some waited. My memory serves me correct. It's been a long time since I read the paper, and because I was writing a paper on addiction and mobile phones and gaming, and I used that as a reference for impulsivity. And I think that they sort of tracked the young people, and they found the young people who waited did better in executive functioning in schools at 15, 16. I stand corrected, and I urge people, they can read themselves. You can Google it. The research papers out there, or papers are out there. I'm sure there's stuff out there that can explain it better than me. But they found executive functioning was better in the young people who resisted the temptation, who weren't as impulsive. Now, I think that's fascinating, because what you mentioned there is great. There are ways, the tennis match, I call it, between the limbic and the neocortex. It's like a little tennis match going on, you know, this way, that way. Some people, maybe genetically, maybe their social environment, their psychological environment has helped them become better at being logical, at being rational. We can all improve, we know that. What I would say is that there's a good paper people can read, which I read years ago too. In Phineas Gage, he had the industrial accident, and sort of cutting a long story short, the Phineas Gage story, I believe that the industrial accident he damaged the frontal, and people saw huge personality differences in him. Where was it, he had like a pole that went through his head, I think, or something along them lines.
It came from his, basically flew up in there, crossed his jaw, crossed his eye, and got out at the top of his head. So it was about there. So he damaged this very, very front part, actually, of his brain, and namely it's kind of ventromedial prefrontal cortex.
Yeah. And huge personality differences people noted after the damage was done. But the irony was, what I find fascinating about that story, Gabby, is that not what he couldn't do, but what he could do. To think that, precisely. I mean, from what I understand, he'd gone to New York or something along them lines, which was a long way away from where the accident happened. And I think, memory serves me correct, when I read the paper, he would go on to talk to people about what had happened, and it became like this sort of, notoriety type thing and novelty. But the irony was, it shows how the brain, is so fascinating. And I think sort of digressing a little bit, I think that, for me, what you say is key. The environment is crucial, and it's a crucial to flourishing. And we're sort of focusing on leadership here now. I'm going to sort of ask you a couple of questions on a few more areas that I'm sure will help the viewers a lot. I'm not sure if you...
Actually, I'll elaborate a little bit on what you mentioned, because I think it's very related, actually. So when we speak about Marshmallow test, it's a test which indicates how engaged prefrontal cortex of those little children is. Now, there is both nurture and nature component to it. The kids who grow up in the families which are more predictable. So if mom says, I'll take you to the cinema later today if you do the dishes. And if the child does the dishes and mom takes the child to the cinema, then those children do usually much better at actually resisting the immediate urges, because they trust the environment. Now, the children who, the parents say, for one or another reason, say they will do one thing, but they don't do that thing. or kids who grow up actually in orphanages. The study then show that actually they do really poorly in Marshmallow test, but not quite because of the prefrontal cortex is not working well, but because they know they can't trust what people say.
The environment, for sure.
And that's very important for working places as well. So if as a leader or as a coach of the people in the leadership positions, very important is actually to create really, really consistent environment for the team. So they know exactly what are the criteria for success, what things they need to achieve, and what would be as a result of it, and actually being consistent with that, and being being fair with that, because unfairness is one of the biggest dissatisfaction in the workplace.
Of course, yeah, and what people view to be unfair, yeah.
Yeah, like if you're seeing that I've done this and I haven't got recognition for it, and another person did 10th of what I've done and got a lot more recognition, and that kind of is a very strong emotional trigger which deactivates the prefrontal cortex. Now, when we talk about ventromedial prefrontal cortex, and both leadership and decision making is a very, very crucial area. So let me tell you just very briefly about the studies done by Antonio Damasio. I have one of his books here actually called Self Comes to Mind, but he's written another book. Him and his wife, they done some really great breakthroughs on decision making in humans and on why emotions are important to make sound decisions. And his wife Hannah is amazing scientist, and he's both a great scientist and really, really good speaker, and giving lots of general public talks and writing lots of books. So he's written a book called Descartes' Error, where he describes in that book, and him and his wife published many publications, scientific publications on that as well, where they studied people, not just like the Phineas Gage, who had damage in that brain area called ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Some of them had damage due to the kind of, they fell off the bike. Some of them got hit by the baseball bat to the forehead. Some of them fell down the stairs and hit the front of the head. And some of them kind of had some neurodegenerative diseases. So whatever the reason was, he only worked with people who had kind of similar, only that area damaged, no other area damaged. And when he interviewed, firstly he interviewed the relatives, and the relatives were saying that actually not only the personality changed, but also the decision making changed. So they became extremely selfish, every single one of them. From loving and caring parents, grandparents, friends, they became very self-absorbed, really careless, and kind of sociopathic. So they would take all, they would have no problem at taking lunch money stealing lunch money of their own children and spending it gambling. They would have no problem whatsoever taking the whole family's saving money and just kind of wasting it on the things they most immediately urged for at that time. So they didn't really have as kind of long-term planning and thinking as they did before. They couldn't really truly care for other people or be like kind of take into the decision-making processing other people's needs as well, because that's quite a complex thing to take into account. And also they couldn't postpone their most immediate urges, similar to some of those kids, in the Marshmallow test. They would stand no chance at that Marshmallow test. In fact, probably 2-3-year-olds overdo them on that test,
Yes.
And if so, that what would happen. Many of them became addicted to gambling. Many of them developed other addictions such as food addiction, alcohol addiction, because they had no willpower whatsoever.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and also very interestingly, Damasio done lots of studies on them, and what he noticed that one thing which was actually working in the brain differently. They like cognitively, when he did they did IQ tests and all sorts of other tests. They were scoring really high on the other kinds of intelligence. If the intelligence hasn't changed as much as it was before. So he had really successful lawyer, who was, you know, like scoring really, really high on IQ tests. He could rationalize really well. He could like kind of have a really sound debates. But if you ask him to make a personal decision, for example, what would he like to eat for lunch? Or when would he like to meet his wife? He was constantly stuck in that state of mental contemplation. He would go see pros and cons in each of the options, but he wouldn't be able to choose one. And the same Damasio saw in those other patients who, when they had more complex decisions to make, that they kind of, when there was a lot of information to process for the brain was getting overwhelmed in the rational processing, which was still working well. But there wasn't emotional. Now what we know, what Antonio Damasio demonstrated, and it was shown a little bit before, that ventromedial prefrontal cortex, or that part, the kind of part in the middle, ventromedial just kind of describes the location of prefrontal cortex, is crucial, actually incorporating emotional component from amygdala into our rational processes. And if that fails, a lot of times we get stuck in indecision. And very interestingly, we see that with people also who are going through depression. In depressed state, amygdala is raging, prefrontal cortex is slightly suppressed, and ventromedial prefrontal cortex in particular changes the activity. And a lot of times people are stuck in indecision. They can't make decisions, you know, for themselves, which they know they should do things, but they can't force themselves to do those things. Or sometimes if they even need to make trivial decisions, you know, which yogurt to buy in the supermarket, or to have beef or chicken for dinner, they keep thinking and speculating between those two, and then they burst into tears and say, I'm not going to have dinner at all, you know, like it's.
Yes, yeah, that's really interesting.
So
yeah.
decision making is, in fact, both areas, amygdala and ventromedial prefrontal cortex, are crucial for both in leadership, understanding other people and relating to them and taking their needs into our decision making, and for us making sound decisions for ourselves as well.
That's really interesting information, useful information, and so that's I think it's really fascinating. I think that, you know, we can all develop and be the best we can be. We are, you know, biology influences our behavior, psychology, our attitude, our mental health. Certainly sociology, our social network, our environment has a big impact on what we do too. All these things interact, and we're the sum of all these things and every experience we've ever had, and then we end up with an output. I think for me, we can all do the best we can do, Gabija. We can all, if we're here, improve to get to there. And I think that's quite useful information you provided there to understand the mind a bit deeper. Because many techniques that we use, they're not a means to an end. And the technique we're using is to help people go forward, be more productive, and be the very best they can be. What I find quite interesting, really, for me, is that people's ability to concentrate. Now, you mentioned the way earlier the work week is structured. Now, I think the structure of the week should change. We're in a different world now. I think they should, you know, the old 9 to 5, and one of the reasons being, like you said, you know, sleep and rest is really important. But I think also too, for me, people's ability. Now, that could be down to the world we live in these days, a different place that we used to live in. We've got other things that can direct people's attention away from what they need to do. But the fact of the matter is, people are probably struggling to concentrate for as long than what they. I'm not saying they could concentrate more before in the past, but now you've got social media, you've got gaming, you've got all these different things. And for me, I wrote a dissertation a while ago on addictive behavior around gaming and social media, and I think social media is great. It's a great tool. It's a great way to contact, and we can talk across the other side of the world together, and it's quite useful. But the other side of it too, from the point of view of people looking to get stimulation, the dopamine fix through social media rather than focus. And what can people do who almost like rely on this, constantly checking their phone? Because really, the mind, we know, is very goal directed. It's very difficult to focus on 10 different things at once. If you've got a job to do, and you mentioned earlier about allocating, at least these are my words, not yours, the way I so allocating time to get something done. So if I say, you know, Gabby, can you get this report done, or put a time frame on the report, then it's focus on that one there. For me, people, generally speaking, in the corporate environment, in my experience, because of all these distractions around them, and they're looking for that constant high, that instant gratification, that dopamine fix, so to speak, they're constantly distracting themselves. And it's okay to check the phone, but check it every 40 minutes. I work in 45 to an hour cycles where I kind of do what I got to get done, then I have a moment of breathing, meditation, go for a walk for 10 minutes. Every hour I'll go for a walk for 10 minutes. I might check my phone. I might do something different what I didn't do. And that really works for me. So people find their own way forward. But what's your take on that? What's your take on people who...
Yes. So, yeah, those habits can easily become vicious cycle, because what we do keeps changing our brain. So, for example, there is actually different attention systems in the brain. And I think we might have touched that in the previous interview we had, actually.
Yeah.
So there is an attention system which enables us to focus on the goal we're trying to achieve. So let's imagine at work, you're trying to complete a presentation or complete, a project of some sort. And there is so using that like goal directed attention system. Another system is kind of environment reactive system, which enables us to notice if suddenly, like, somebody fell in your office, somebody is asking for your attention, or if I don't know, that your chair got on fire, or whatever is happening around you. So those two systems are constantly competing with one another. Environmental stimuli, your phone beeping, that's environmental stimuli. They constantly so we can't focus on both. We can't be focused on our thing we're trying to achieve and what's going on around us. And in my opinion, it's very, very important to actually decide when is the time for one or another, to really have
mentalize,
and because when we are, if we kind of have sustained attention on the task we're doing, actually we're training our brain to be better and better at focusing. If we keep shifting between two things all the time, we're training our brain to have so-called scattered attention. And that's just the different dynamics of those two different brain networks interacting with one another and suppressing each other. So, and that's the same, like when we talk about those children on Marshmallow test, the willpower can be trained. And our how long we can focus on something is exactly the same principle as kind of trying to resist the marshmallow, getting longer, bigger reward a bit later, as opposed to quick reward immediately. And if we kind of keep giving in that immediate small reward, two things happen. First of all, we struggle to focus for long periods of time. And many people come to me and say, I have ADHD, can you help me? And that's very, very common nowadays, to have really, really short attention span and to really struggle to focus for longer period of time. But second thing happens is actually our reward systems become blunt. If we're constantly exposing ourselves with little rewards, then like those things stop giving us pleasure. So we need more and more to get the pleasure. So imagine if you have chocolate every day, then after a while, the chocolate is not sweet enough for you, right? Or if you're playing the computer game every 15 minutes, it doesn't trigger you enough, so you need more and more. So you either need to eat more chocolate each time, or chocolate more frequently, or to keep checking things more frequently. So it's kind of losing game a little bit, because we get more and more drawn into that circle, and we need larger and larger doses of whatever thing is triggering our reward systems. So if you want to kind of snap out of it, so first thing is actually to start small. And so imagine putting the timer. Let's say you focus for 5 minutes only on something you're trying to do. If you can do that successfully, let's say 3 times a day, increasing that to 7 minutes, then increasing that to 10 minutes, and building up till you can actually do as Jimmy can for 45 minutes. And if you can, focus on the task for 45 minutes, and then your reward is for 15 minutes, taking complete break and do whatever you like. Very important is to have realistic expectations. If you expect yourself to kind of, be able to focus on your work with no breaks all day long, you'll fail.
Of course, Yeah,
brain.
definitely. No, for sure.
So
it's like running a marathon. You know, you don't run. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's important to assess reality. If you check your phone every 2 minutes, then 5 minutes could be a challenge, you know. Maybe starting even with 3 minutes, it could be a good start.
Yeah, expand it for sure.
It's kind of adjusting where you are. So taking the time, how long you can focus now, and increasing it by, let's say, 10%, by 20%, by a little bit. So you have, and kind of doing that regularly, and taking regular breaks and putting the time on, because one of the reasons why people are unproductive at work is that they don't take enough breaks. And when brain gets tired, it makes really poor decisions on what's best for them. It makes really poor decisions in terms of your work as well, because your prefrontal cortex doesn't get that many nutrients anymore. So your brain constantly needs to actually get kind of, you know, take some time off and to relax a little bit. And the best time to do that is either do something, whatever you want to do, like without trying to control your urges, or completely like kind of taking stimuli free times, either meditation or going for a walk or listening to music or having conversation with somebody which is just making you laugh, or you know, is enjoyable. So those things help your prefrontal cortex to relax for a little bit, and as a result, after that break, your prefrontal cortex will work better.
For sure, definitely. And what I find quite useful is activity scheduling, Gabby, where people can like schedule activities. So if they've got like a weekly planner or a daily planner, then they can sort of schedule activities so they know, okay, I'm planning on to the movies tonight. That's my enjoyment for this evening. At lunchtime, I'm going to go for a walk and eat with some friends. And so that, but these are the periods we're going to focus on. So I think activity schedules are quite useful. I think also in terms of expanding concentration, I think that they can start with tasks that they're good at. It's always a good place to start, where if you've got a task to do, then maybe start, like he says, break it down to manageable tasks, but also start with doing something you're good at doing. If you're sort of a bit overwhelmed by a big task, you might think, okay, I'll focus on an area that I'm confident in, then build as you go along. And that's what I find quite useful too, and like baby steps. And you mentioned earlier before, like, you know, the brain, activity in the brain. When we first learned to tie a shoelace, the activity in the brain would have been like a Christmas tree. Now it's literally dormant, it's unconscious. And I think for me, it's getting people to, from an emotional point of view, from a behavioral point of view, getting to the point where these behaviors, these competencies become unconscious. So we're not going to consciously think what to do. We start consciously, like when we first learn to drive a car, first gear, second gear, we stall, but now you get in the car, you just drive. You don't know how you drive. It's unconscious. And I think by practicing, for me, generally speaking, it's a good way for it to be an unconscious competence. So we're not having to think consciously and expand so much energy, but we can sort of, you know, relay the network in the brain, rewire the brain in a way where the brain neurons that wire together, that fire together, wire together. So okay, if you practice anger, resentment, frustration, you're going to get good at it. If you practice love, compassion, and joy, you're going to get good at it too. And the best way to practice for me is to be experiential. Do things like walking, do things that naturally produce, you know, watching. So finding as many activities as you can that stimulate the brain in that way is quite useful too. But what I found quite fascinating, it's sort of going a little bit off piece now, and I'm going to bring it back in. I know time, we're nearly sort of running out of time, but what I was going to say is that, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with the rat park experiments. That was quite fascinating, where it's not, we're talking about leadership and business here, but from an addiction point of view, so now we'll start for another day. But for many, many years, Gabija, the emphasis was on addiction, was isolation, avoidance, and the rat park experiments. And once again, people can Google it, and something I read about when I was writing a dissertation a while ago too, where what they would do is they would get the experiments for rats were given the choice of morphine or water, and the rats were generally once they chose morphine, they would carry on having the morphine until they passed away. But the experiment in the 60s and 70s, the top of my head now, it'll come to me. People could email me. I read the research. I was writing the paper a while ago. But what this guy did was that he created a rat park, an environment where everything that rats could ever wish for, cheese and other rats and all these like dopamine producing activities in this rat park. And quite interestingly, a lot of the rats would refuse the morphine. because they had external stimulus in the environment. So the premise is that you can create an environment. Now, you could argue, hypothesize that some people have the rat park and still don't function well, and obviously there are various components biologically, psychologically, and sociologically, but it does go to show that the environment has a big part to play in our concentration, and certainly from the point of view of addiction. So people who are addicted to this, to that, to the other, to the phone, to whatever they're addicted to, perhaps changing the environment could alter that. So if you said to people, yeah, you can, you know, go on your phone in an hour, you can do this. So creating an environment where, you know, people, rather than isolation, and certainly when I run courses, I tell people, I'm teaching a course, I tell people, you know, if you've got a phone, put it on silent. And if you do need to take a phone call and it's urgent, fair enough, but take it outside the classroom. But also you'll have chance at break time to do what you got to do. Because I fully appreciate the modern world that we live in. It's different to the world we lived in years ago. People, you know, it's important to people, and people have got that effect really. So, you know, what I'm implying there is what you sort of mentioned there. I think that the environment is a big part. But one thing I want to put to you, Gabby, which, you know, before we sort of close, and one take that you've got on, I think that's quite useful for people. In primal times, Gabby, the best chance to survive for people was to be in the tribe, in the herd, so to speak, in the group of people. So all those years ago, the best chance any of us had to survive would be to be part of the tribe. If we were rejected, then we face danger. If we were isolated, we'd face danger. We'd have to face the animals, the other tribe on our own. I think, in my opinion, that sort of herd tribe mentality still exists today, where people are afraid of being rejected from the tribe. And the brain, what you mentioned there, the part of the brain, the limbic system, I still think it's the same reaction. We don't have the same dangers we used to have before, but I think subconsciously, you know, there's almost this sort of reaction where, okay, people are afraid to think outside the box. And if people watching this don't sort of, you know, buy into what I'm saying, because there's couple of things I want to put to you. Look at social media. Look at the cognitive dissonance if someone puts something out there that doesn't sit well with them. And look at the confirmation bias. In 2.5 seconds, someone will like a post that fits into their belief framework. And I think for me, you know, we want to question, we want to grow, we want to encourage people to think outside the box, but people are afraid sometimes, I think, to put their hand up and go outside the herd and say, okay. And I think for me, the brain, from a survival point of view, has got this negativity bias. Yeah. So in primal times, if you went out to a different town, what you'd come back and talk about is the dangers. The story would be, and I think human beings are storytelling creatures, and we still tell stories now. And you'll see in environments, Gabija, they're toxic environments sometimes, in the sense that people create this negative environment, and it's almost like, okay, in primal times, the story, when human beings are storytelling creatures, and you sort of go to a different environment, you'd come back and say, well, I saw these dangers. And I think even now, there's so much good happening in the world, there's so much good happening in the environment, but it's like at Christmas time, and Christmas a couple of months around the corner, if someone goes to 10 stores and they get treated wonderfully in say 9 of them, they give them good discount, they're treated nicely. If one shortchanges them and gives them a bad deal, the one they go home and tell their partner about is a negative one. And I think that culturally, for me, it's breaking that negativity, it's breaking that negativity bias the brain has, and encouraging people to, it's okay to think different. Yeah. It's okay to see outside the box.
So I think you mentioned quite a few different things there, right? So one thing is that our brain is tribal. Our brain is social. Yeah. And the reality is we have no choice. The mammal brain, for mammal brain to feel safe, mammal brain is really, that area just there in the middle is really primitive. For the mammal brain to feel safe, it needs assurance, it needs love, it needs to be heard of. So we actually, only once that mammal brain is calm, we can be rational, we can be smart, we can, you know, disagree with the tribal mentality, we can do all sorts of things. First thing is actually safety. Now, how to meet safety? There is multiple things. So if you want to create, if you want your team in your company, or your client, if you're a therapist or coach, or your family members to feel safe, we need consistency, We need assurance, and we need actually to notice people for who they are, and to actually help people feel valuable and worthy for who they are, not for the certain achievements, not for ticking the boxes, but to truly notice. Because once we notice and seeing, that kind of amygdala comes down. It's very similar what happens to the babies, right? Baby is crying, the baby sees mom, baby is calm. Baby's in the arms of mom, there is no reason to cry.
Soothing, yeah.
And it's the same exact area, which actually in our brains need to be satisfied first before we can be intelligent, before we can make best decisions, before we can be good leaders, before we can perform well in our job. And if as a leader you notice that your team is not performing very well, ask yourself, how safe do they feel? How connected do they feel to you? How consistent and how kind of, clear the rules and the setting is for the mammal brain. If the mammal brain freaks out, it will hijack and sabotage all the other functions. And once we make the mammal brain feel safe, then, then we're capable of all sorts of things. Now, also asking yourself, what are the things which are making my mammal brain to feel unsafe? If for you is constantly checking Facebook and being liked or disliked on Facebook triggers that kind of amygdala state in your brain and makes you feel criticized, unsafe, well, perhaps a good idea would be actually to control how frequently you go on Facebook. If for you,
of course, yeah.
If for you, like going, looking at the pictures of the models is triggering your amygdala state, or looking at the cars you can't afford, or comparing yourself, training actually your brain to reduce that comparison as well. So kind of avoiding, so first of all, creating safe space, avoiding the triggers which can be avoided to make your mammal brain feel. If there are certain people in your environment who constantly criticize you, and if you can avoid them, or if you can actually draw boundaries with them, that would make your mammal brain feel safe. And third component is self-soothing. Now that component is something what only you can do. And there is multiple things which could help you self-soothe, but training your internal dialogue, no matter how loving and caring your environment might be, if there is internal war going on there, we will always find the reasons to suffer about. And that's one of the main reasons actually why clients come to me, is that they kind of keep chasing different environments. They change jobs, they change relationships, they're still unhappy. No matter how much they achieve, they notice things which are still lacking in the world. And kind of, we have a capacity to train our mind to think differently. And a few methods I use with my clients. One is transactional analysis, which help people to change their internal dialogue between so-called inner parent and inner child in the transactional analysis method, but I use more like prefrontal cortex, soothing the amygdala. Prefrontal cortex actually helping the amygdala to feel really, really safe. And we can, and that's for many people is, it can be really, really hard to start with, but if they practice regularly, it gets better and better. One simple thing you can do even today is write down 5 things that went well today. Or write down your gratitude list, what things you're happy about and grateful for. And that would already start training your mind to actually really soothe the amygdala. And if you can even imagine that if you have in your mind, if you have a little devil and little angel, now which one you feed more, that would be growing and growing and growing.
Great point, yeah.
So each day you have to ask yourself, how much am I feeding that little devil and how much am I feeding that angel? Because if your angel is already, nearly starved to death, you'll only hear the devil's voice. And in reality, there is always both. We are wonderful and great, but we are also flawed. We have both qualities. And in each talk I give, there is a number of people who absolutely love it. And there's usually at least one person for whom it doesn't resonate for that person, that they talk. And do I focus on those people or do I focus on that?
Yes.
If I don't train my mind, my amygdala automatically will focus on that one person.
Magnification, very much so.
If I keep feeding my inner angel, my inner angel would kind of be having a nice conversation with Adele. Say, okay, fair enough, I hear there's been a person who didn't like your talk, but there's been 149 people who loved the
Very
talk.
much so, yeah.
So
And yeah.
it would help us to be much more balanced, because if we allow our amygdala to do judgments on our life situations, things are out of proportion. Mammal brain is not very good at making judgments and good decisions in our modern world, because it boosts the pain and it reduces our achievements. So we want to actually, we want to soothe our amygdala, we want to use our prefrontal cortex to get much more realistic view. So asking what things went well today, what, even asking other people, what are my great qualities? If you think you don't like your character, you don't like your parents, asking yourself, what things about my body do I like, or about my appearance?
Yeah.
What things about my character do I like about my life? And actually focusing on those, because your amygdala will take care of the other part. Your devil, you don't need to put any effort to feed it more. You're kind of, because it's evolutionary hypothesis states, and again, like it's pros and cons, but those evolutionary hypotheses, back in the tribal times, it was much more important to avoid danger than to seek.
Of course, yeah.
As a result, we developed quite neurotic brains, which constantly notice bad things. Because if in savannah, you kind of walked and they were like, if in the bushes were moving and you thought it was just the wind, and if it happened to be a tiger, your life was ended like that. So people who were more neurotic and always saw danger everywhere were more likely to survive in those really, really rough times. But unfortunately, this is the very reason why we can't thrive anymore, because our mind becomes that kind of survival mode. So if you want to learn how to get unstuck from that thinking, if you want to learn how to become more resonant with yourself first and with other people around you, both in your personal life and in your work, whether that's whether you are directly in the leadership position in your work, or whether you work with clients, or whether you feel like your relationships at work with your colleagues can be improved, and also if you want to learn to make better decisions and to get unstuck from indecision and to make decisions which actually make you happier, the decisions which actually really work for you well. For that, incorporating emotions is crucial. So if you want to go much deeper on any of those levels, and actually communication as well, if you want to learn how to express your needs and your ideas in the language which is most brain friendly for other people, so come to my workshop on the 4th of November, Neuroscience for Coaches and Business, Leadership and Decision Making. Jimmy probably will add the link under the video.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll add the link there. So in that talk, we spend 5 hours looking at the actual neuroscience basis of it. We look at the different brain areas. We look at the different networks, and after each learning, there will be like neuroscience bit with evidence and with scientific experiments and brain scans, and there'll be like time to reflect and like for yourself and discuss with others. Because the best thing, or my favorite thing about those whole day workshops, there will be a small group, up to 30 people. And the group is usually so wonderful, really supportive, really like proactive, and sharing the examples. And every single time after I run those workshops, people say that the best thing they got is actually learning the neuroscience bit and discussing that with people and realizing I'm not the only one struggling with that.
Very much.
I did on self and productivity. Like so many people said, I feel so relieved that I'm not the only one struggling with procrastination, or that I can't change my habits, I can't force myself to do that. And having a nice group of people to actually create your own plan with the kind of solid neuroscience background, learned before that. How can I do things differently, step by step? So if you want to have that experience, if you want to go much deeper on that, I would suggest not to give it a miss this time. And also, this is the last time actually I'm doing this workshop this year. So that might be like a really good chance if you want to jump onto the opportunity, because the next workshop I'll only do next autumn, so it'll be 12 months wait for the next workshop. So if you want to learn, it's a bit more about that now. Now it's a really good time for that.
Yeah, no, definitely, I fully recommend, and I think anyone watching for sure. I mean, do get in touch, and you know, Gabija goes into the why, the neuroscience, and gives you the what and the how to make changes. And I think it's, you know, you provide some useful information there, and certainly the understanding our thoughts, the distortions that we have in our mind, correcting our thinking so we see things differently, is a big part of it. And I think sometimes even telling people, how would you advise somebody else who got that bad feedback, what would you tell somebody else? 'Cause it's easy to personalize, to blame, it's easy to magnify the negative and focus on the aspect that's not going well. And I think what you said there is fantastic, and doing things like journaling and writing what went well, gratitude list, and it's creating a new storyline is quite useful, because you can sort of pick up people's way of thinking, their distortions when they tell a story. It tells you a lot about how they feel, emotional reasoning, all that sort of stuff, really. But I'm sort of mindful of time, and you're very kind of you to come on the show. And if anyone wants to get in touch, Gabby, how can they get in touch with you to find out more about the workshop?
I was just about to ask you the same, if how they could get in touch with you. But let me firstly mention where I have a website called mybrainduringtheday.com. So there is a link there. Also, you can find, you can get the tickets to this event on Eventbrite, eventbrite.co.uk. If you go on there and just Google Neuroscience for Coaches and Business, Leadership and Decision Making. Or we'll add the link as well. Or if you want, you can drop me an email if you have any questions about it at all. My email is dr.gabija@supergcoaching.com, and I'll add that under the video as well. But Jimmy, please share how, if anybody wants to have more discussions with you, and Jimmy does a wonderful work with individuals on actually helping them change their behavioral patterns, and some really spectacular results in changing their behavior. So would you like to share how people could get in touch with you if they wanted to experience your methods?
Yeah, very much so. We got the Facebook page, NLP and Hypnotherapy Mindset for Success. That's NLP Hypnotherapy Mindset for Success. My email, they can send an email through to info@excelnlp.com. That's info@excelnlp.com, and they're more than welcome to send me an email. And for sure, I do a number of events and conferences and courses around the world, and even if you want to get in touch, they want more information on today. There's only so much you can cover in an hour or so. If anything that we covered today, I want more information, they're more than welcome to email me. I'll send them some information on some of the areas that we sort of touched on. We could talk forever, and we could certainly, you know, it's endless really. But I'd like to think people got a lot out of it today. We really touched on some really key elements that can be useful. Obviously, everyone's on their own journey, and they take what they will out of it. And you know, it's always enjoyable to talk to you, Gabby, and we always bounce ideas, and I get a lot from our conversations too. So.
And just to mention the context, we've done a lot of workshops together with Jimmy, and I couldn't recommend his workshops stronger. They're really great fun, and really go deep to the core reasons of our behavior. And Jimmy, as you notice, has also good understanding of neuroscience. And we, before even this call, we spent like nearly, you know, another hour just discussing science, and we can't stop. So.
All sorts of conditions, yeah, definitely. That could be another seminar for another day. We can talk about some of the stuff that we talked about.
So we'll do that.
Yeah, definitely. But thanks, Gabby. I really appreciate your time. Thanks very much, and thanks for watching.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Thank you. Bye.